The slap that changed everything. The slap was sharp and embarrassing, and it reverberated throughout the room. The intensity of the look in my brother's eyes surpassed the sting that quickly spread across my cheek. He was not upset with her. No, I was the focus of his fury. Why do you always have to cause problems, Lyra? My stomach flipped over. My brother, whom I had always protected, had recently chosen the side of his wife, Sable, who had struck me across the face in front of our entire family. His wife, Sable, smirked and raised her hand, challenging me to react. I'd spent too much time rationalizing her brutality. I'd accepted the games, manipulations, and insults. However, what about this? It was wartime. I wiped my cheek, inhaled deeply, and gazed into her insolent eyes. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. I was going to wreck her world, even though she didn't realize it yet. Chapter 1. The Origins of Deceit. The room became silent as the slap landed with a crack. In addition to the impact, the shame made my cheek blister. The betrayal in my brother's eyes was worse than the sting. Why do you always have to cause problems, Lyra? Merrick's speech was more stinging than the physical slap. His wife, Sable, gasped and grasped her hand as if she were the victim before I could react. Gosh, I did not intend to. However, Lyra only irritates me. Everyone in the room was watching. Every set of eyes shifted between me and the woman who had just abused me in front of our entire family, aunties, uncles, and cousins. No one raised their voice, however. It had humiliated me. However, the smack wasn't the only thing going on. This addressed all Sable had done to separate me from my own family, step by step. And now? Merrick was finally right where she wanted him. But she was in for a surprise if she expected me to lose it. Raised in a family that was formerly Merrick was more than just my younger brother. He was my best friend. We were inseparable as kids. During middle school, I protected him from bullies who pushed him into lockers. When he had nightmares at night, I stayed awake with him. He learned how to drive from me. I was the one who ensured Merrick had a father figure after Dad abandoned us. Not only were we siblings, we worked as a group. When did he first meet her? I greeted her. Initially, Sable looked flawless. She always had the right words to say and was charming and articulate. When Merrick first introduced her to me, I thought, wow, he's found someone amazing. He screamed over the phone, Lyra, I can't wait for you to meet Sable. She's fantastic. You'll admire her because she's so sweet and educated. When did I first meet her? She radiated warmth, smiles, and perfection. Too ideal. However, I overlooked the warning indicators. Because I never suspected my brother's girlfriend of stealing, manipulating, or lying. I should have known. Because the greatest deception of all is perfection. The transition from charming to malevolent. It began gently. Sable was initially just passive-aggressive. Lyra, don't you have a wedding date? That's okay. I suppose not everyone finds love. Or, I noticed that you wear a lot of black. I read somewhere that when people are lonely, they do this. I dismissed it. I might have overanalyzed it. Perhaps I was oversensitive. And then the exclusion started. Family dinners were something I learned about after they happened. Merrick began composing shorter compositions. Nobody answered the phones. Our annual trip to see the Christmas lights, which we had planned for years, was suddenly forgotten. For months, I didn't realize Sable was marrying someone apart from Merrick. She was aiming to remove me from his life. But what about the worst part? Merrick granted her permission. When it turned into war, I had done nothing wrong the night of the slap. It was a modest family get-together, one of the rare occasions where I felt truly welcomed. I arrived early to prove to my family that I still belonged. Then I made a fatal error. I took my seat. That is all. I sat in a chair. It appears to be Sable's chair. She charged at me with ferocity. That's my seat. I blinked. I didn't realize we had assigned seating. You should know by now. Her tone was harsh and patronizing. People turned to see the approaching storm. It's just a chair, Sable. In an effort to maintain peace, I chuckled lightly. She did not, however, want peace. She desired a performance. She then slapped me. Hard. There was stillness in the room. My vision went fuzzy for a brief period of time, caused by shock rather than pain. Merrick, too? He took her side. Why do you always have to cause problems, Lyra? I felt chilled. She had prevailed. She had been successful in making my brother despise me. What, then, was Sable oblivious of? I was not the type to lose a conflict. The final straw. I calmed my voice, wiped my cheek, and inhaled deeply. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. Sable grinned. She thought she was superior to me. She didn't know what would happen. Because there was more at stake than just a chair. There was more to it than just a smack. I had documented everything she'd done to me. I'd had enough with her winning. I was going to make her accountable. The monster behind the mask in Chapter 2. It started with a grin. You assumed she was harmless because of her perfect, well-planned grin. At first, Sable had a way of making people fall in love with her. She possessed grace, beauty, and the ideal words to brighten any room. Charm, however, was a weapon. I was on the verge of being her latest victim. Inconspicuous cuts. Initially, it was nothing. That's what I told myself anyway. Her slights, which were always disguised as jokes in casual conversation, seemed easy to dismiss. You are very self-sufficient, Lyra. You are still unmarried at your age, which is wonderful. Wow, such an unusual wardrobe choice. You don't care what other people think, do you? You didn't know about the family breakfast? I believed Merrick had informed you. Sorry, every remark was poison masked as honey. At family gatherings, she consistently took the lead, cooking, pouring wine, and laughing the loudest. And me? I'm being pushed out slowly. Invitations were quickly forgotten, conversations went on without me, and when I did speak, she managed to redirect the conversation somehow. Merrick did not notice. Or maybe he didn't want to. Sable perfectly embodied the roles of a devoted wife, an innocent victim, and a misunderstood lady merely trying to fit in. What if I highlighted the cracks? The problem was me. You're imagining things, Lyra, Merrick said, shaking his head. Sable is simply trying to be kind. Perhaps you should give her a chance. I felt like yelling. However, I didn't say anything. For a time, the isolation game Sable wanted me to leave, not just make me uncomfortable. Merrick was first. He began responding to my texts more slowly. Every week, we go on coffee dates. Unexpectedly canceled. My parents would tell me about family events after they occurred. Mom used to respond, "Oh, I thought you were busy. Sable mentioned you had a lot on your plate." I did not. However, this was unimportant. She was substituting herself for me. I overheard Sable and Merrick conversing in the kitchen one evening. It was not meant for me to hear. Sable expressed concern. I just think Lyra is too much sometimes. What do you mean? Merrick was perplexed and inquired. I am not sure. She's always nervous around me. She doesn't appear to want me around. I just want her to give me a chance. It's exhausting to continually feel like I have to prove myself. My stomach twisted into knots as I clenched my fists. She was acting like a victim. Merrick exhaled deeply. I'll speak to her. Maybe she just needs more time. I wanted to jump in and ask her to stop lying, but I knew what would happen. If I addressed her, I would demonstrate her correctness. I turned to leave. I wasn't done, though. Not quite yet. The tipping point. A family get-together was the final straw. I just sat in the wrong chair, which was a simple mistake. Her seat. I didn't realize it was hers. How did I manage? However, Sable's entire disguise crumbled the moment she entered the room and saw me sitting there. Pardon me, she said with a chilly tone. That's my seat. I looked around and blinked. All other seats were occupied. I started to say, "Oh, I didn't realize," before getting up. Unfortunately, it was too late. Sable jumped forward and slapped me. Hard. The room was filled with gasps. In addition to the impact, the shame caused a blister on my cheek. Then the genuine treachery occurred. Lyra, what the hell? Merrick lost his temper. At me. Not directed to her. The woman who had just attacked me in front of our entire family is not responsible. Not at the one who has spent months isolating and dominating me. He was not unhappy with Sable. That was for me. Something broke inside me. I refrained from crying. I did not beg. I simply rose to my feet, looked at Sable's triumphant expression, and muttered, "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." Because now, I wasn't going to just leave. I meant to ruin her. Next chapter, the beginning of the investigation. Sable thought she had conquered. She didn't know what would happen. Section 3, the tipping point word count, 750. My cheek was no longer wounded, but the ache of betrayal was still present. Every time I remembered that night, I felt a new wave of rage, the slap, the humiliation, and the way Merrick stood up for her instead of me. I had helped and protected my brother for years, and this was how he paid me back? By defending a woman who had forcibly separated me from my family? No, I could not let this go. I had swallowed my pride and tried to be the bigger person for weeks, hoping that things would change. But after that evening, I had a discovery that entirely changed my life. Sable wasn't only a terrible person. She made a threat. If I didn't move quickly, she would wreck my brother's life in the same way she had tried to damage mine. The armor's initial crack. I expected to receive an apology the day after the hit. A message. Anything. But I simply heard silence. Merrick did not respond to my calls. My parents pretended that nothing had happened. Who is Sable? By creating her tale and playing the victim, she steadily alienated my family from me. During dinner, she spoke with a quivering voice. "I just don't know why Lyra is always so hostile toward me. I've tried so hard to be her friend, but she always looks at me like I don't belong. Maybe she's just jealous?" I bit my tongue so hard that I tasted blood as I clenched my fists beneath the table. I did not feel envy. I was outraged. However, rage would not help me. I needed to be knowledgeable if I wanted justice. I forced a grin and suppressed my rage. "Sable, you are accurate. Maybe we just got off to a horrible start." Her eyes widened with surprise, but she quickly covered it up with another artificial, syrupy smile. "Oh, Lyra, I'd love nothing more than for us to be close." Untruthful. Placing the trap, Sable was certain that I was giving up. I paid attention. What's most important? I waited. I gathered as much ammunition as I could for weeks. I kept a watch on Merrick's money and noticed big, unexplained withdrawals. When I glanced through the family conversations, I discovered that Sable had deleted my comments before Merrick could read them. I followed her around and learned she wasn't spending late nights at work as she had said. It became darker as I dug deeper. Sable wasn't just deceiving my brother. She was deceiving him. The conflict. One damp Sunday afternoon was the final straw. Merrick and I were planning to get coffee together. But guess who was sitting next to him when I arrived? Lyra. Sable smiled as if we were the most intimate of friends. "I plan to join you all. I love spending time with my favorite sister-in-law." I stiffened my jaw. Her realm was being designated. I responded calmly, "Actually, Sable, this is a conversation I need to have with Merrick alone." Her smile faded briefly. However, it was enough. "Oh, naturally," she said politely. I wouldn't want to intrude, but her eyes were cautious. I decided to disregard it. When she left, I stared at Merrick. "I need you to listen carefully, because this might be the most important conversation we've ever had," I said as I passed a folder across the table. Regardless of his grimace, he opened it. Then all of the color departed his face. There were bank statements inside. Substantial financial transfers. An offshore account in Sable's name is receiving everything. Merrick turned the pages, saying, "This has to be a mistake." "No, Merrick," I said aggressively. "For months, she has been draining your accounts. She did not want you to handle the money because of this. She would always make excuses when you questioned her about money. She's more than just a manipulator. She is a thief." Merrick's hands shook. I need to speak with her. She would not injure me in this way. She already has." I saw doubt in his eyes for the first time. The fear. It was possible that his wife was not who he thought she was. That's when it happened. Sable entered again. She first looked at Merrick's face, then at the folder, and then at me. She was aware. "What's this?" she asked in a carefully regulated voice. "Why don't you tell me?" I sensed the first splinter in Merrick's devotion to her when he responded in a cold tone. Sable appeared scared for the first time. Merrick, you don't believe this, do you? Lyra has always tried to block our relationship. She is inventing things. The deception, however, did not hold this time. Merrick sprang to his feet. Give me your phone. What? Sable, here's your phone. At the moment, she hesitated, and I saw everything in that instant. The fear, the guilt. She had misjudged both of us. Merrick froze after picking up the phone and looking through its contents. He looked at whatever was on the screen and said, I can't believe this. What? What is it? I pressed. Sable raced for him, seized the phone, and slammed it against the table before he could reply. Her eyes blazed as she cried, You stupid little brat. You just ruined everything. Merrick focused his sight on her. He had seen her for the first time. I knew right away. We defeated Sable. What is the best part? I hadn't finished with her. The Truth Beneath the Surface, Chapter 4. I felt a lot of pressure on my chest when I decided to explore more about Sable's history. Nobody else seemed to notice, or worse, didn't want to, yet something about her never made sense. That was not something I was about to overlook. I was sitting in my flat that evening, my laptop open and a newly poured cup of coffee cooling beside me. As I sifted through countless pages of search results, the faint light from the screen flickered over my face, assisting me in putting together a jigsaw puzzle that no one else had bothered to look at. I could not have predicted what I discovered. The initial hint. Initially, they were just murmurs in the digital void. A 5-year-old restraining order under her maiden name that is disguised in legal records. As I reviewed the information and clicked on it, my breath stopped. Psychological manipulation. Financial deceit. Violent threats. Her ex-fiancé, who had submitted the request, described Sable as a talented manipulator who could take advantage of any situation. Reading about how she cut him off from his family, convinced him to give up his savings, and then damaged his reputation with false claims when he tried to flee made my stomach turn. Seemed strangely familiar. She treated Merrick the same way. With whitened knuckles, I gripped the edge of my desk. This problem extended beyond an unpleasant sister-in-law. This was a deliberate repeat offense. Her next victim was my brother. Missing money. Fury and newfound resolution motivated me to continue my search. She was doing this as if she had done it before. I used my marketing knowledge to sift through bank files, public financial data, and everything else I could uncover. I noticed the offshore account at that point. She opened a Cayman Islands bank account 6 months ago, immediately following her marriage to Merrick. What is the name? It's a shell persona, not her own. It appeared to be a harmless savings account at first, until I observed the deposits. Several small transactions were made to filter out substantial withdrawals from Merrick's company account, traditional money laundering methods. My ears throbbed with my heartbeat. She wasn't just deceiving my brother. She was blindly robbing him. A destructive pattern. I inhaled deeply and continued digging. As further details about her past surfaced, 2 more guys with surprisingly similar stories emerged. One was a former coworker from another position. He was dismissed due to his misappropriation of business cash. Accusations of fraud, which now looked out of place, threw his life into chaos. What about the other one? The individual in question was a long-standing acquaintance who unexpectedly disappeared from social media. I looked through old boards and came across a topic that highlighted Sable's exact deceptive behavior and warned about a woman who damaged lives. Who put it up? Removed. There was a pattern. Come closer. Command. Destroy. Proceed. How about my brother? He was the next person in line. The moment of change. With a shaky sigh, I reclined in my chair. I have the evidence. I recognize her. What about Merrick, though? I had to show him since he refused to believe it. The situation required careful consideration. Sable had already made up his mind against me, so if I merely shouted accusations at him, he would protect her. I had to figure out how to make him see the reality for himself. I therefore set a trap. I called him the next day. Hey, I need to chat in private. He replied hesitantly. I would rather not continue doing this, Lyra. Sable considers. Merrick, I interrupted, maintaining a controlled tone. Come and visit me. 1 hour. All I ask is that you give me 1 hour. If I'm mistaken, I'll discard it permanently. There was a long pause. Then, all right. With trembling palms, I hung up. It was this. The configuration. We initially met at a cozy cafe outside of town. Avoid all distractions. There are no disruptions. I explained everything to him, including the restraining orders, offshore account, and financial activities. He did not even look at them at first. This is insane, he said, shaking his head and murmuring. She wouldn't. Merrick. I didn't mean to sound that sharp. I threw a paper copy of her statement from her offshore account at him. His gaze swept over it. Then it expanded. That look seemed recognizable to me. Doubt was breaking through the barrier of denial. His palms grasped the edges of the paper as he continued to read. The restraining order was then displayed for him. He strained for breath. What is this? Her history. And, if you don't get up, your future. He appeared scared for the first time. Finally, he saw the beast I had been facing on my own. But, before we could both say another word, my phone vibrated. An undetermined number. I responded. Hello? The receiver picked up the sound of a caustic, chilly voice. You shouldn't have done this, Lyra. Sable. The blood in my face began to drain. She was aware. She wasn't done yet, either. The Betrayal of Betrayals, Chapter 5. The time for reckoning arrived sooner than I expected. Merrick never questioned anyone, including the woman he loved. However, when I presented him with the evidence, the missing monies, the concealed offshore account, the restraining orders, and the lies, his manner changed significantly. The water gushing through the holes in his face resembled a dam breaking. His fingers tightened over the financial statements I'd printed out, and his face grew pale. No. He shook his head in surprise and mumbled, No, this can't be right. It is, I said in a controlled but firm tone. And deep down, you already know it. He took a deep breath, his hands trembling as he flipped the pages. Each line was a story of deceit. He had been duped by the woman he had pledged to live with indefinitely, influencing him, eliminating me from his life, and granting her entire authority. Merrick, desperate for an answer, switched his attention between my face and the proof. In certain ways, this is not true. He whispered. She told me she was handling our finances to take the stress off me, as if saying it aloud would make the delusion seem more genuine. She said she was investing for our future. I placed a hand on his arm and made him look at me. Merrick, she didn't set money aside for your future. Without you, she was saving for her own. There was quiet between us. His shoulders drooped as the full force of truth pressed down on him. When he finally said, I need to talk to her, his tone was hollow. No, I shouted. It is not necessary for you to talk with her. You must take action. She has more time to tell another lie if you confront her without a plan. She has one more opportunity to justify her actions. You must have intelligence. He had already reached for his keys, however. I really must listen to her. When I ask, I need to see her face. My goal was to stop him. I wanted to let him know that Sable was not the kind of person who would come clean. Sometimes, however, people must witness their own tragedy before accepting it. So I gave him up. I followed that. The conflict. When I arrived at their house, the quarrel had already begun. Voices echoed in the gloomy foyer, with the front door partially open. How could you even accuse me of something like this? Sable's tone was sharp and defensive. Because I saw the proof. Merrick's voice broke when he shot back. I entered silently and stood near the hallway entrance. Even though Sable had her back to me, I could tell she was nervous because her fingers trembled against the marble kitchen counter. This is insane, she exclaimed, appearing to be outraged. I have done nothing but love you, support you. Then explain this. Merrick tossed the papers onto the counter. The documents in question were bank records. International transactions. These transactions are subject to orders of restraint. This was the first time Sable had stumbled. There was a momentary hesitation, but it was there. Then she modified her plan quickly. Her voice became lower and frilier as her shoulders fell. Merrick, you don't believe this, do you? She inclined her head in my way, saying, "This is what she wants." Lyra has always disliked me. She's manipulating everything, making you hostile to me. "Don't you dare," I said, entering the kitchen. Sable's facade slipped for a moment, and something evil flashed in her eyes before she restored her attention to Merrick. She murmured, "Baby, please," and stretched out for him. "This is something we can fix. It is simply a miscommunication." Merrick, however, did not move. Then she lost her fury. She exclaimed, "You ungrateful idiot." She banged her palms against the counter. "Before me, you were nothing. I created you. I improved your terrible life. And now you're getting rid of everything because your little sister is unhappy?" Merrick stepped back. I also saw it. That's when he realized exactly who she was. His jaw tightened as his breath hitched, and his expression darkened. He had been advocating for her for so long. I had faith in her, cherished her. How about right now? He could finally glimpse the beast beneath the mask. "Get out," he said in a firm yet quiet voice. Sable's face crumpled in disbelief. She did not expect to lose. "What?" "Get out of my house." She laughed caustically and sourly. "Do you believe you can simply expel me? Do you think this is the end of it?" Merrick maintained a stern face. "It's already over." He pulled out his phone and dialed 911 before she could react, manipulate, cry, or scream. "I'd like to report fraud, identity theft, and domestic abuse," he told me. In real time, Sable's entire world came apart. "Merrick, no." She lunged for him, but I stepped to the side. "Try it," I whispered. She paused. She appeared scared for the first time. Sable was still yelling when the police arrived. She cursed Merrick. She cursed me. She even attempted to persuade the police that she was the victim. However, the proof overpowered her lies. The handcuffs were locked with a click. As they dragged her away, her eyes met mine. She hissed, "You think the adventure is over? Lyra, you are going to regret this. I promise." I grinned. I already won. When the door closed behind her, I glanced at my brother, the boy I knew, the man he was becoming once more. My query was, "Are you okay?" His response was obvious, despite his shaky voice. "I will be." I believed him for the first time in years. Since Sable has left. What about us? Finally, we were free. The final nail in the coffin is Chapter 6. I placed the documents in front of Merrick, who sat across from me, his hands quivering and his face pallid. Transaction history, bank statements, and messaging screenshots were all like knives in his heart. "She took everything," he stated in a mournful tone. I watched as the final illusion collapsed into dust and reality dawned on him. The woman he trusted and loved had naively defrauded him. "But it wasn't simply money," I said. "It's more than that, Merrick," in a forceful tone. "She has manipulated and isolated you. She has already manipulated and isolated you. Examine the orders of restraint. Examine the details of her previous relationships. Such an act is not affection. It is a command." His fingers tightened into fists and his jaw crunched. "Excellent. Allow the wrath to escalate. Allow it to awaken him." "I need to talk to her," he finally whispered. I exchanged a head shake. "No, Merrick, you do not have to speak. You must stop it." However, I noticed it in his eyes. He wasn't yet prepared. She needed to be seen for who she really was. That's when I got the idea. It was meant to be perfect. The trap is in place. Merrick returned home that evening as if nothing had happened. I asked him to be calm and act normally. We needed to give Sable the sense that she still had control since she lived on it. In contrast, I had a task to do. My best friend Zahn helped me research Sable's web activity. I contacted one of her former fiancés, dug through old forums, and created a timeline of her previous scams. This wasn't her first time doing it. She had done it repeatedly. The similar pattern applies to different men and cities. And now, we had evidence. However, the gesture was insufficient. She needed to come out. How betrayals betray Merrick prepared the bait for the following night. When he arrived home early and appeared exhausted, he informed Sable that he had something important to discuss. As he spoke, he placed his phone on the kitchen counter and recorded everything. I saw some weird charges on my bank account, he told me. Sable didn't blink much. Oh! Most likely, it was a simple error. I'll see to it. He blocked her when she reached for the phone. She stiffened. Actually, he explained in a strained, conversational tone. I looked deeper. I identified a few transfers abroad. Sable, your name appeared on them. A pause. Something flared in her expression, not fear, but annoyance. Then she sighed. She cooed, Merrick, sweetie, and approached closer. You're worn out. You do not comprehend. Allow me to take care of it. Her usual tactic was to gently trail her nails as her fingertips touched his arm. He did not move, however. I also discovered about your prior fiancés. Orders of restraint. The money that vanished before you moved here. The legal actions. Her mask finally snapped at that point. The warmth had vanished. It got less soft. Sable appeared exactly as she was. Her voice, as sharp as glass, muttered, "You think you're so smart. Merrick, you don't know anything. You don't know anything. You're pathetic, so gullible and in need of affection. I chose you for that reason." She grinned. And you know what? It seems there might be some challenges in demonstrating this. Merrick rushed for his phone as soon as she stopped speaking. Every word was recorded. Her gaze widened. She was the one who appeared terrified for the first time. A queen's decline. 1 hour later, the police arrived. Merrick had finished listening to Sable's outburst and her desperate attempts to construct the story. He handed up the evidence, which included verbal admissions to manipulation, identity theft, and bank fraud. The cops did not think twice. They promptly took her into prison. "Merrick," she yelled, struggling against the handcuffs. "You are doing something wrong. I was the best experience you've ever had." He did not even give her a glance. I noticed her eyes as they drew her out. She was aware. I was victorious. And that was very pleasant. The repercussions. That evening, Merrick sat next to me, expressionless, staring at the wall. He said, "She almost took everything," in an angry tone. I almost let her. I touched his hand. You didn't touch his hand. That is what counts. His breathing came out shakily. "I owe you, Lyra." I gripped his hand and smiled. "No, you aren't. My brother is you. I just got back to you." And for the first time in years, I knew she had left and we were finally free. The last turning point a few weeks later, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. I picked it up. The receiver picked up a strong, gruff voice. "You think you won?" Sable was released from prison. "You'll regret this, Lyra." I grinned. "Sable, no. You will." I hung up. Because of this tale? It wasn't done yet. The Final Reckoning, Chapter 7. Except for the constant ticking of the judge's clock, the courtroom was silent. Sable sat across from me, her once perfect posture slouched, her eyes darting to Merrick like a dying woman reaching for a lifeline. But there would be no aid. There would be no last-minute reprieve. Only the harsh, frigid reality she'd been avoiding for too long.